Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the relentless geekery.
Point in the laundry rotation, you know what I mean? It's kind of funny. I don't think I'm quite Seth Brundle, but it never matters to me what I wear. Well, not never. Most of the time, it's just find pants and shirt that kind of match. They have a common color or whatever like that. But I've worked on having most things in my closet not be special occasion things or things I wear all the time. And so I select a pair of lounge pants and I select a shirt. And I don't know, just like I said, I haven't gotten to that point of I have 10 white shirts and 10 black pants and you just choose the next one in a row.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind that.
Right. I always said when I was younger, as long as I have a pair of jeans, I don't care what my shirt is because everything goes with a pair of jeans.
Yeah. You know what's funny is all through college and after getting out of college, I wore jeans all the time. And then something just one day clicked over in me and I said, I'm going to try some Dockers because I don't know. I don't think I was going to apply for a place that was, of course, the blue shirt and tan Dockers required uniform. But at least I knew I'd be able to get other colors besides blue.
Right.
And then also they wore very well. And I discovered that I liked them. So then I got, I found the Dockers that fit me, and then I got half a dozen pairs in different colors, and I just kind of abandoned when you go on hikes, it was like, well, I should have jeans on because they're, invulnerable. You can get scraped on rocks and stuff.
Right.
But then you read about cotton is rotten and should best be forgotten, and that, jeans really are bad if you get wet because they will just suck the heat out of you while they're drying you, or you're drying them is a better way to put it. Right. And so, I don't know. Now I have a couple pair, but I only kind of break them out when I don't even know. It's not like a special occasion for jeans. I just turned my face away.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, the cargo pants. I was big on the pants of holding.
See, and I used to love going to the Army Navy store because not only did they have those kind of pants, but they almost always have them in my size. There's all kinds of big guys in the Army. And so
it's all the potatoes.
And I loved camo and just regular green. And I don't think I ever went to the parachute pants where they were like white or things like that. But I really did love having, even before phones, I always had, wallet and comb back when I needed a comb and pens. I used to carry 3 pens, like a black, a blue, and a red. And who knows why, but it just seemed important to be able to say, well, if I need to write something important, I should highlight it in red. And
because of MacGyver, I used to always carry my Swiss Army knife and duct tape.
Absolutely. I never carried duct tape, but Swiss Army knife. In fact, I might have talked about this before. When I got married, I gave away Swiss Army knives to all of my groomsmen, and it had their name engraved on the haft of the blade. And a number of them, it's just like a long time ago, that they still talk about. That's like the one handy gift they've ever gotten. And of course, they have fond memories every time that they pull it out. They're reminded of, well, that was a fun wedding.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I should also mention that the name of the knife brand was the Super Tinker, which is like, well, how manly is that? I didn't want to reveal that to anybody.
Great.
Okay, sorry.
I always wanted the one that had every device that they ever offered on a Swiss Army knife all in one knife. It was like too big to actually use.
Exactly. And the reason I got this one is because I actually went back before there was, I don't think it was website time, but it was where you could go to a catalog and see all the various different versions. And mine was the one that had what I thought everything that was practical. I don't know that I needed to have a corkscrew in there. And a previous Swiss Army knife I had in college, the corkscrew was the thing that always got caught on your pants, if anything did. And so but it had a toothpick and it had an awl and it had all the different blades and stuff. And I just hadn't proceeded. Oh, now it's got a taser. I hadn't gone the next absurd place. You know what I mean? So,
right. So lots of stuff going on this week. We had our great live podcast with the Lost Cities.
Yes, I thought it really went well. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we went to the Lost Cities RG, the regional gathering, and we started with that as our jumping point. But then we talked about cool geek travel and things were to us, discoveries and stuff like that. And I don't know, the audience really seemed to enjoy it, and we had no problem coming up with a good hour of
Right.
all the fun discoveries.
And I thought there was a bit of a twist on the naming, because wasn't Dayton RG missing for a couple years that they didn't hold one?
Yeah, it's actually they might be one of the ones that has. I think that they didn't do last year, right when the COVID bit them.
Yeah.
But compared to in our in the Midwest region, I think Columbus has taken a year or two off, but I think Dayton, Cincinnati, they've been very, very consistent. I think Pittsburgh almost had to take a year off because they had one of like the hotel contracts fell through or something. But then one of the members actually had it out on. They have a nice country estate, if you will, and they had it out at their place. And from what I understand, it was really nice. So
That was my first RG.
out at
Bill and
Bria's
Bria's.
and Bill.
Oh,
That's
yes.
very cool. I did not know that. Okay.
What an intro to the people of Mensa. Instead of going to the RG at the hotel, it was at their house. We were in there. My kids were like 14 at the time. And I don't know if you've ever been to Bill and Bria's. You walk in and it's wall to wall bookshelves everywhere. And my kids' jaws dropped and they're like, oh my God. And Bill and Bria like, yeah, go ahead. So here's this big house that has books everywhere, and my kids are just wandering around, like taking books off the shelf and looking at them. And it was very relaxing, and it was the perfect intro. And then they had tents set up outside, and Paul and Marty show up, and they're introducing everybody to Exploding Kittens. And my daughter played kittens for like 8 hours, and I heard her laughing so much all day long. And I'm like, this is so perfect. And they have very fond memories of that whole weekend.
I think we had been to Pittsburgh like 10 years in a row, and for whatever reason we couldn't make that year. And I always wondered what it was like. I've been to a couple things that we call ungatherings, where instead of being the full bore, it's got lots of hospitality, lots of programming, the whole thing. That instead it's just a group of 24 people get together and they spend the weekend gaming and talking and staying up till all odd hours, and the hospitality is kind of not haphazard, bad word. It's impromptu, right. You know what I mean? Where we go to a big run to a Sam's Club or a Costco and get a whole bunch of stuff. And yet, to me, the gathering has never been about the food. I know people love it because there's such a variety and a profusion of food. And yet, I'm okay with just having Diet Dr. Pepper and peanut M&Ms. You know what I mean? Not anymore, but that used to be like...
That's the great thing about all those. It caters to just about every little quirk that everybody has. Do you like the junk food? Do you like the good food? Do you like the drinks? Do you like the talk? Do you like the party or the games? You've got it all in there. So
yeah. And also, I love things where, it isn't only like hotel catered. It's always that people have been baking for weeks, if not months, leading up to it. And so you'll get, there's always Buckeyes because it's Ohio, and you'll get every kind of brownie and just the creativity of people where they make a soup and they'll tell you exactly the ingredients in it so that you don't have to worry about, I hope that there's no MSG because I have a sensitivity to that. The people are so incredibly generous and solicitous, and just like, the Hell's M credo of, make sure that the morning after the party, everybody remembers that they had a good time. Right. It really is in evidence at RGs that the people who've been doing this for a long time, or that the example that they set for everybody coming in is, overserve, but don't have it be only junk. Like you're saying, for every box of cheese crackers, there's also fresh fruit and fresh vegetables and that kind of stuff. Every variety of pop in case somebody's still looking for tab. You know what I mean?
You know what you missed at the one at Bill and Bria's? Chocolate covered bacon.
That might have been the first time that made a Mensa appearance. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, we are blessed in Cleveland to have had Nancy Heller for a long time, and she was always very good and current and experimental, and so we almost always had all the regular stuff, but then just that she would have chocolate covered bacon because, hey, it's all the rage, we're going to have some too. I love that.
And I know I've heard some stories that Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, we used to be one region or one district, region, whatever,
right? Cleveland and Ecom. Yes.
Yeah, then it broke apart. And we're like the only place around that doesn't do an RG. So I go to Cleveland, I go to Columbus, I go to Dayton, Cincinnati, I go to PA, but I hardly ever do anything in Ecom. It's really weird.
Yeah.
And Columbus just started doing RGs again the last couple of years. They hadn't been doing them for a while.
Exactly. You know what it takes is a spark plug. It takes a couple people to
Yeah.
be the anchor that's going to say, we're going to do this. We really could use some help from all of our friends. And sometimes it's only a couple people. So I know Indianapolis had an RG for a long time, and they burnt out the people that were doing it every single year, but with not enough assistance.
Right.
But luckily, the Midwest in general, Region 3, really seems to have that spirit of, now there's certain people that have always done hospitality that kind of help out each other's groups. So it's not only Virginia and Cincinnati, Nancy will do a meal. And you know what I mean? Like sure, Rachel will do a meal. Whoever else are the biggies. When Hell's End was Skinner and Yvonne and Rob and Nikki, you could count on them to always be doing like, yeah, we'll run like Eric and Heidi do now. We'll take care of the snacks.
Yeah.
You know, if we do, each group does a meal and somebody takes care of the snacks, nobody gets burnt out. And that's a good thing.
Because I know, I mean, I've done enough volunteer work. I know you get sucked in and it's like, oh, it's only a little bit of time. And then next thing you know, you're 3 nights a week for 4 months. And it's very easy. You lose, I don't have time for anything. And then you don't enjoy it yourself. And I felt bad because I haven't done a whole lot of volunteering. So I try to do talks because that I can do. And I've tried to do the games, running some tournaments and stuff to help out with that a bit.
Exactly.
But I just know I just cannot commit to let me help organize the whole thing for the next 6 months. That's a little beyond my capabilities at the moment.
Yeah. So. It's funny. Colleen and I got to a point. So at the Pittsburgh AG, the annual gathering, which is an RG times 5, it's that much bigger. We have been in Mensa for a long time and have made lots of friends. And lots of friends asked us to do things like you said. Can you run a tournament? Can you do a talk? Colleen, you love coffee. Can you handle the coffee? And we did so many volunteer things, not objecting to any of them because they were our friends. But honestly, we sat down. And it runs from Wednesday to Sunday. We sat down like Saturday night at 9:00 and said, we finally don't have, what do we need to worry about next?
Right.
And we just said, we won't do this again. It will be that we have to disappoint some people, but I'm going to choose to do like one talk. And in Pittsburgh, for instance, I was running the Smart Life. It was an early social media website before Facebook was around. And so I got my Smart Life crew to come and help me, but we did like a 6 to 12 Saturday morning shift in hospitality. And it was really a lot of work. It was not only that we did it, but that the Friday night people, as you might imagine, Friday night is kind of the day when everybody's a little bit letting go. Well, whatever refilling and arranging and cleaning they should have done, not done to spec. So the first thing we did there was like say, oh my God, run the Augean River through here, clean the stables out, and we're going to have to kind of start from zero instead of being at 80 and going to 100. Well, like I said, I think you just paralleled what I usually do is I know that I can do a talk. And also I tend to do things now that I don't want to just be a pair of hands. I know that I have good stamina and I'm tall and whatever else might help with the load in and the load out. But a lot of people have a fear of public speaking. They don't want to do that, whereas I have no problems with it. Right. And so I try to do the things that are particularly me and other people can't do it and not just be kind of faceless. It matters to me that I think I'm really making a contribution instead of just being a drone. Right. And so that leads me to I run a particular tournament or do a particular talk and things like that.
And I owe you an apology for this past weekend. I really did want to come to your talk at 1:30 and I have a mastermind meeting at 10. And so I went to the mastermind meeting and then, I got a couple hours. I'm going to go out and start working in the yard, had my headphones on and I'm working. And I didn't even have my phone and I had the alarm set and all that, and I come in, I'm like, oh man, it's like 2:15. It's like, dang it.
Elle's almost done. Exactly. Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, one of the joys of like, this was a new program. I had been working on this one for about a month and putting actually maybe in more, doesn't matter, but it was, again, the Lost Cities theme. And so it was fun to like go back in my mind through comic books and think about all the various different lost cities. And then kind of like what we did, don't just stop with lost cities because there's only so much you can talk about the jeweled city of Opar or Shangri-La. Let's talk about, comic books have done lost, there's not lost cities. There's whole countries that they created. There's whole dimensions. There's whole worlds. And so it was just fun to kind of sprout out like a big old octopus and say, we need to talk about Legion of Superheroes because they have 50 different worlds, each of which somebody developed a particular power because, hey, this was the magnetic planet or whatever else. And it was a lot of information to get through, but I love doing a talk where if people aren't aware of the cool depth and richness of comic books, I get a chance to like just splash them with all of the cool things that 80 years of comic books have brought to us. You know what I mean? So especially when their only experience is they know about Wakanda because of the Black Panther
Right now,
movie.
the movie, yeah.
And it's like, wow, it's been in Marvel Comics since 65. So it's got 55 years worth of little reveals as to how did it come to be and who has, besides the Black Panther, how has it influenced the world? What about vibranium? You know what I mean? I don't know. I really love doing those kinds of talks. And now that I got this one kind of in the can, I can offer it to other RGs and do continual updates and tweaks, fix my typos,
Right,
that kind of
right.
stuff. And so I think I mentioned Baldwin Wallace has an adult learning program that they've asked me to do a series for, and about comic books. And because I've already done a number of interesting comic book talks about female archetypes, about diversity, about history of comic books in general, now I have this one in the hopper, and I think I'm like 5 out of 6 to the good. I didn't even have to start writing and try to think of how would I organize 6 talks. It won't be a complete thing about comic books, but each of them will have this interesting facet of the world of comic books that it'll be fun to do an updated version of each of them.
Something a little more than just, let me tell you my favorite stories.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, both of us are doing often speaking engagements. I'm happy to say, end of August, I think, end of April 29 or maybe, I'm speaking again at Kent State. And it's probably still going to be virtual, so it's going to be a Zoom presentation like I just did. But it's the one about female archetypes. And what's a joy about that one is I first gave that talk like 10 years ago. Well, as you might imagine, the world is kind of waking up to the fact that, ladies have been around for a long time.
Right.
Ladies are absolutely the equal of men. So I've had to update this program more than any other program that I've done because they keep on like, hey, there's another Wonder Woman movie. There's a Captain Marvel movie. There's comic books that are now absolutely introducing a female version of Thor or other things that have widened the field. So whatever used to be the comic books were like for teen boys, it sure is wonderfully shifting. You know what I mean?
The female Thors probably coming to movies.
Yes.
There's still talk that Shuri is going to be the next Black Panther. So
exactly.
Big changes there. And I know Disney with Star Wars made a big push. And we've talked about this, don't fix things by going completely the other way, which breaks it in different ways. But they did a big push where they were focusing a animated series on the women of Star Wars. They didn't call it that, but it was Rey and Princess Leia and Amidala and even Ara Singh, and different animations with stories with just the focus on the females, which I thought was cool and interesting. But I don't think it took off as well as it could have. I think it was exactly that. Well, we don't really have a plan, but we're just going to do all women because that's what everybody wants. And that's not necessarily what everybody wants.
Yeah. And, it's worth, I know this comes up often because I guess it's something that's happening often around us. I really do like where they have a new series, a new take on existing continuity, but I really don't as much enjoy where they just say, scratch all that, scratch 200 years of Sherlock Holmes or 150, whatever it might be, and just say, no, we're doing a whole new take. Well, so, we just watched the first episode of The Irregulars. It's now on Netflix. It's a series about the, Holmes always had the Baker Street Irregulars, which were urchins and street kids that, because they don't get noticed by society, but they can be very much his agents out collecting information and doing little tasks for him. Well, the tenor of the series, unfortunately, is that there's going to be a supernatural element really strongly. And so much a part of the Sherlock Holmes ethos is it's logic. It's elementary, dear Watson. It's thinking through things, not just saying it's inexplicable and we're just going to have to ride the wave until we figure it out. So, and they portrayed Sherlock Holmes as being, he's not brilliant. He's like an addict, and they're just, I don't like so much the rewriting of, I know that, the 7% Solution by Meyer was actually a very cool book that talked about how, you can't do recreational drugs without them kind of doing you after a while. And so it was about his struggle, and was his will going to be enough to overcome that? And so my first take on The Irregulars is that I don't know, that I wish they had done it without it being Sherlock Holmes. They could have said, hey, it's a rival consulting detective. And,
how much is he in it? Because they don't say a whole lot about it in the description. And that's one of the shows I want to watch.
So it isn't Sherlock Holmes except in like peering through the door at him knocked out from his drugs, or him going into a manic something or other because of it. Watson is the main connector to the Baker Street Irregulars, and from what I remember from the books, that is not at all the case. They were very much Holmes's team,
yeah.
and they have made a point of it being, it's Victorian era London, and it's a very diverse group. So they have, Caucasian and Negro and Asian and whatever else it might be.
Nice.
But having said that, there's some. I'm colorblind. I want it to be that everybody has a chance to participate, but you can't be that everything else about Victoria era London is there and kind of trying to be true of it, and then act as if there wasn't incredible prejudice, there wasn't incredible danger to various different people. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
whenever they had an Indian character until the Raj was eliminated, they weren't running around free. They were indentured servants and like struck just for getting in some rich man's way and stuff like that. And so maybe it's only a stereotype from back then, but I think that stereotypes are around for a reason. The class system in England treated horribly anybody who wasn't posh, who wasn't of the landed gentry, if you will. And so there's some off notes about them trying to inject modern sensibility and culture into, it's not only like from 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it's from when, the world was not fair. The world was shitty for poor people. You know what I mean? So.
And I don't disagree with any of that at all, but we also have a slightly different viewpoint. We would like to see it more accurate for the time period, whereas 98% of the rest of the world, at least in America, doesn't want that. They want it to be the PC correctness of their viewpoint today.
I guess, exactly.
And arguably, the thing with Holmes, it wasn't brought out strongly in the stories, him doing coke and his manic depressiveness and split personality at times.
Right.
And I know
on the spectrum, etc. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But I know a lot of researchers, a lot of professors and academics, they delve into the other dark side of Holmes, and I think that does bring out even more so the character in an interesting way. I mean, if not, then he's just Sheldon. So I do like, I think I'm going to watch it now this week. You've intrigued me. I want to see what they do with Holmes, but it's a good way to do something different with them too.
Exactly.
So,
and it's episodic instead of being that they're all out there. At least I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're releasing it or whether it's all out there for binging.
Yeah,
we make a point of usually watching one episode at a time so that we have a chance to let it kind of like percolate. You know what I mean?
Netflix.
We speculate.
It's probably all binged, all out there.
You're probably true. Yeah, you're probably right.
Well, now I'm intrigued because I mean, I know our viewpoints on Supernatural are a little different, and that was one of the things Gina and I said, oh, that looks really good. And honestly, I know it said Holmes. I'm like, Holmes. I never even put it together with the Baker Street gang. And I was like, oh, now that you said that, now I get it. A little slow.
I love the fact that they, it's very cool. Like there was a great series called Penny Dreadful that was kind of based in the same period. And they brought in elements of vampires and werewolves and zombies and whatever else it might be. And they did that quite well with referencing classic literature. Is Captain Nemo going to make an appearance? A little bit of what Alan Moore did with League of Gentlemen, really, really well. So I really, it's a wide open thing they can introduce so many different things. I'm looking forward to what's the real conspiracy. And, there's always an interesting thread that runs through them all, that it's not just vignettes. There really is a looming menace. Is it going to be that Moriarty is not just the Napoleon of crime, but that he's actually the leader of a coven or something like that? So I'm looking forward to the twist they put on it. Yeah. It's kind of funny. I've loved Sherlock Holmes. Back when I was young, it was a big thing to graduate from like Encyclopedia Brown to Sherlock Holmes.
I love Encyclopedia Brown.
And so I'm saying, but you know what I mean? Those were like pretty kiddie things, and they were short stories, and you can get, okay, here's the thing that little secret that they're trying to reveal. And I remember like Sherlock Holmes might have been one of the first things where I didn't read them as individual books. My parents got me the collection. It's a 2-volume set that has all the novels and all the short stories. And just to sit there with something that's like, as a little kid, you kind of got to like prop it a certain way, or it's going to, it's too heavy to hold for regular reading. But I just loved that I think I mentioned I love things that have a certain sense of time and place, and these things haven't been written, to be serial. You know what I mean? That they kind of like how Dickens wrote many of his books before they were novels. So the fact that Arthur Conan Doyle, and this is kind of funny, I know that for all of what Arthur Conan Doyle made Sherlock Holmes to be this perfect, logical creature, he had himself a very strong interest in seances and mediums and the supernatural. And so, by having said, it's not with canon, it's actually kind of truer to what they were. If Conan Doyle had allowed himself to put himself into his books, not only the idealized self of Holmes, or that he was maybe the Watson character, that it's kind of cool that they know enough about him that they're saying, he wouldn't have objected to this. The estate is thanked at the end credits. And so it's like, well, that does make sense. They would kind of say this is true to who he was as a human being, that he had interest in everything, including both of these elements, even though they seem to be different ends of the spectrum. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And speaking of all this, one of our big topics we were talking about is, again, changes in the comic industry.
Oh boy. How about Marvel? You know what I mean? They are the big dog in terms of comic book movies, and still the big dog in terms of publishing, but they, as you talked about with your son working at the comic book store, they broke away from Diamond.
Yes.
Right? A long time ago. And what were they going to do without the biggest distributor? Kind of a rivalry, so you have news. What have they decided?
Well, so recap, back when the pandemic started, DC went in a completely different direction and they broke away from Diamond. And Diamond has been the major retailer for over 20 years in everything. In fact, almost a monopoly. I had a friend.
Right, benevolent monopoly, but a monopoly. Exactly.
I had a friend who couldn't get his independent comic published because Diamond said, no, we don't want it. So he had no avenue.
And if they don't carry it, there's no way to easily get it to all the stores and all the people.
Right. Okay. Now that's changed in today's world, but 12 to 15 years ago, that's how it was. And Diamond controlled all of that. And they did a lot with like magic cards and stuff. When I dealt with magic cards, I had to go through Diamond. And there were several times something special would come out and I'd order some and they'd say, yeah, we don't have any for you. Too bad. And I wouldn't get them.
Because they were allocating it based on love, sales,
yes,
whatever
exactly.
else it might be. Yeah. Okay.
So during the pandemic, which we talked about a couple months ago, DC broke away from Diamond and they went with a completely different distributor. Now that is a good thing in that there's competition. But the bad thing is that according to Adam and Colin, it's not that reliable. They've had to wait several weeks sometimes for DC shipments. And there have been a couple times when a small book, they may have only ordered 3 copies of or something like that. They didn't even get, it's waiting. 3-4 weeks later, sorry, you're not getting any of that.
Right.
So that doesn't
help. They don't even reissue the reorder for it. They just drop it. Oh,
yeah. And that's not Diamond. That's the new company. And there's a lot of times it's, when did comics the comic book stores would be closed on Tuesday because they're putting out the new comics and going through the pool list. So you go Wednesday to get them. Well, now, we'll send them to you on Monday next week. Well, no, the following week it'll come on Thursday.
So you can't even do your scheduling for when your people usually come in and do the evening thing to get ready for Wednesday.
Right.
Okay.
So it hasn't been the best thing. The good thing is when I go in, there is a lot of independent comics now sitting on the shelves. So that's a good thing. Well, now Marvel has made this big deal with Penguin Random House, who, as you know, is one of the big publishers for books.
Sure.
Well, I don't know what all is going to happen, but here's my take on it. And Colin's kind of this way. He's like, they're a book publisher. They don't have any inroads with small comic book shops. They deal with Walmart. They deal with Books A Million. They deal with Barnes and Noble and big places like that.
Yeah.
So,
and not individual comics, but like books, graphic novel versions and stuff. Oh, boy.
That's the thing. Colin says that he doesn't think they're going to put too much emphasis on individual issues and focus on trades. So, if Marvel's suddenly pushing a lot of trades and making money on that, what's going to happen to the single issues? And
what's going to happen to local comic book stores?
And local comic book stores.
Their 2 biggest publishers are now difficult to deal with or not even dealing with them. You know
Right.
what I mean? They've been unfortunately sounding the death knell for local comic book stores for decades, but this could be a couple
Yeah,
big stakes in that particular coffin. Oh man.
absolutely.
Okay.
And that's just our predictions, but it just
Yeah.
doesn't look good. I look at GameStop, where 10 years ago, if you wanted a used game or a new game, you went to GameStop. That was the video game store. I don't know if you've been to a GameStop lately, but you have to like search for video games. It's all pop culture, bobbleheads and statues and electronic this and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Because, and
Oh boy.
this is another thing, when the Xbox was first coming out, that Microsoft said, we're going to take out the disk drive and make it all digital. You'll download all your games. And people went berserk and said, that's ridiculous. We never want that. Then once the
Right.
Xbox was out, everybody started ordering things from the digital store, and it almost killed the sales of
Right.
physical
That
media.
section was gone of those
Yeah.
stores.
Yeah.
Exactly. Their
So,
biggest section, one of the biggest at least.
right.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so that was irritating because it's like, you idiots, you're doing exactly what you said you weren't going to do. Anyway, so now you go into GameStop, there's not much there. So what's going to happen? Are we going to have to go to Barnes and Noble to buy our comic books? And are there going to be individual issues at all? Or are we going to have to wait till the individual issues are out there if you live in a big city and could go to one of the 5 stores that have it? If
Right.
not, or are we going to have to go to Walmart and pick it off the shelf with all the kids pawing through all of it?
And that's honestly knowing that. So I still go to Barnes and Noble and not Borders, Books a Million,
Books a million.
and so they usually do now have a comic book section,
Yeah.
not only graphic
It's big.
novels but individual issues. And I do have that same objection that they have a lot of people that have pawed through it before you get there. So your chance of getting a mint newsstand copy is next to nothing.
Yeah.
That's for so long why I indeed not only there, but even comic book stores were not secure enough to me that unless I had a pull list there, or unless I started to buy them through mail order, I couldn't get good copies of everything.
Right.
So hopefully the fact that at least there is that connection to bookstores, big ones, but the what's going to happen with the comic book stores? That's kind of, so sorry about this. We noticed that same phenomenon just this weekend when we went to Smucker's Outlet. We went down to Johnson Woods to do a nice hike. It's the biggest old growth forest in Ohio. We went to the Smucker's Outlet, which is nearby. And 2 times ago when we were there, we got like, wow, I didn't know that Smucker's also made these jellies, these baking mixes, these chilies, whatever else it might be. And we walked out with a bulging bag. They've gone that same weird route of, is there Smucker's food there anymore? No, it was Easter material. It was Ohio State Buckeyes clothing. It was things for your dog. They had like all these various different sections had pushed out all the various different sections of food things that we had liked, where that was the only place that you could find lemon poppy seed quick bread.
Right.
And so now the first time we went there, it was wonderful. And the last 2 times, it's just nowhere near the same experience. And so we kind of had that when we went to a place called Tamarack in West Virginia. It's a big arts and crafts place where they actually have artists working on site. And again, we had such a nice, what a discovery. Look at all this cool stuff. And each time that we've been back since then, the selection has been worse. There's not as many artists working there. It's kind of like, wow, we had one good experience and now we get to watch it wither. And that hurts. So we kind of call that getting tamaracked. You know what I mean? That's become our term for that. So to come back to comic book stores, I wonder if that's what it's going to be like. That a comic book store isn't a comic book store anymore. It's a pop art store.
Yeah.
It's got all the little figures and it's got, the ways in which they branched out that maybe they're even more profitable than comic books. And so that's why they've always had t-shirts and plush toys and whatever else it might be. But soon it's going to be nothing. There's going to be no way to get that.
Like Adams, and I know even Kenmore Comics, they do a lot with the pop culture figures and toys and stuff from the 80s and 70s. But at some point that's going to drop off because there's going to be less and less, and there's going to be people wanting stuff from the 2000s. But, there hasn't been the same amount, same quality, and people are like, oh, well, the Star Wars figures are worth so much from the 70s, so I'm going to buy all these toys at Walmart from the 2000s. Well, the stuff from Walmart's not going to be worth anything,
That's right.
folks.
And then you got to wait 30 years for it to become valuable, 50 years for it to become valuable.
Yes.
Is this going to be the legacy for your grandchild? Because you're not going to enjoy it. Not enjoy
Exactly.
the wealth of it. Exactly.
And
So
the funny thing is, and we've both talked about digital comics a bit, and I read digital comics. The great thing I love about Marvel is I can buy the issue, I get a code, enter it in the store, and now I can read the digital issue and just put the physical one away. For me, that's perfect. I'll buy it and love
you
it.
get nowhere on your physical item, on your collectible,
Right. And
you still get to, of course, enjoy the contents. Exactly.
Yeah, I've got 300 comics carried in the back of my back pocket,
Got it.
so perfect. Yeah. Colin I've been saying to him, I'm like, I think digital comics are going to start taking off more because everything is music and streaming and the book publishing. And he's like, no, it's not going to happen. I'm like, yeah, I think it might. Well, semi recently, because Amazon purchased Comixology. So they own
Right.
Comixology, and now they're merging it. So you can buy stuff on Amazon, read it on Comixology, and keep your collections tied together. But as a publisher, you can also publish your own comic books on Amazon, just like books. So if my friend could sit in his basement and working on a comic after work and be able to publish it right to Kindle and Comixology, well, isn't that what Ted did? I mean, essentially, Ted has
exactly. I mean, just that self-publishing of books has been around on Amazon for a long time, and now comic books makes good sense. And there are already, instead of having to do Kickstarter, it really could be that Amazon has smoothed the way for all that to happen. So
I think the next 5 to 10 years in comic books is going to be a little bit of a weird, wild ride.
Yeah, I am a recent subscriber to Comixology. Maybe I don't think it was because of the Amazon transition. It was because I had kind of tapped out on what I could get digitally from Hoopla. They carry library books, and so as I put in all my favorite series, all my favorite creators. And then as I've been reading for a whole bunch of years now, I just wasn't finding enough new often enough. And you know how it is. If you browse through a bookstore and don't find anything, you kind of leave in a humph. You know what I mean? It's like I have wide ranging tastes, and yet really there's nothing new coming out, or there's nothing on the back shelves that I haven't already read. That's one of the unjoys of being a longtime collector, is you really have read a lot of stuff. And maybe it really, so I really am enjoying the fact that now Comixology gets me relatively new and current, but I'm still trying not to buy individual things. I'm trying to go with what they always have, kind of like not even a lost leader, but it's something that they issue that's relatively new, not all of the new, so that they entice you to go and look at the older stuff as well.
Right.
And because I have a gap in my collecting, it's also been, usually just by playing catch up on, I didn't read anything after Atlantis Attacks, you know what I mean, or whatever else it might be. And so the whole King in Black series that's coming out now, like with all the symbiotes and stuff like that, I'm intensely curious, but I don't want to spend $500 on curiosity. I kind of want to outweigh them in the same way that I outweigh Netflix or other services. But Comixology is really being devious in terms of, here's 3 issues out of the 30 you want to read. It's like, don't hook me. Don't get me.
And I love Hoopla also, and I've run into that too. Oh, look, they've got the Amazing Spider-Man trades. 1, 2, 5, 7.
We've laughed about that before. Either things are like when I was first reading books, I had to go to multiple libraries. Yes. It's kind of funny. Right around now, when spring was springing, was when I'd often hop in the car and I'd go to Avon Lake, and I'd go farther away than here to find out what other libraries had good collections. And so then when you find out that Westlake has a good collection at the Porter Library, it's like, okay, I'm going to make this a regular stop for a year, because I'm going to work my way through all the Hulks I've missed and all the Doctor Stranges and whatever else has come out that I couldn't get to otherwise. And yet the problem with any library or any digital service is indeed, I want to read these in order, and I got 1 and 2, and then they jumped to 5, like you said.
Yeah.
Am I going to wait? I don't even want to start. I don't want to start and get my appetite whetted and then kind of squirm about it. And I don't want to start and have a year between where I'm going to forget of something that I just, so it's a little frustrating to not be the wonderful system that I had set up with, where I bought everything from M&M distributors and never missed anything, and I just was a completist.
All you got to do is spend $1,200 a month, and you're fine.
Boy, comic books are really expensive nowadays compared to then, but there was a time when I was spending between $300 and $500 a month, and I had the money. I was making good money,
Right.
a good job, and that kind of stuff. And that's what I wanted to have, pretty much more than anything else, besides my mortgage and my car payment. That's
Right.
what I was spending the most on. But having said that, it is now $1,200 a month because comic books cost $6, not
Yeah.
two.
$6 for 28 pages.
Exactly. And as you know, if you're trying to be not only a reader but a collector, then they have, well, here's the foil variant and here's the sketch variant. And I just is just in my cross, so I bring it up often. I wish they didn't do that as much because it makes it seem like that it's all about collecting instead of reading. Like, I don't want people to buy it, immediately bag it, never read it. I want people to enjoy the fact that it's cool stories, that it's
Yes.
literature.
And
You know what I mean?
pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. And yet there's such paranoia about, oh no, I breathed on it and now it's not, near mint plus.
Right.
Oh well.
The funny thing is, Colin has been for the last couple of years. Oh my God, he literally has been reading several hundred comics a week. He's working
Because he's
his
in the
way.
store. Yeah.
Yeah, he's working his way through everything Green Lantern has ever appeared in, and
my.
working through Batman. I mean, like, getting it online and reading it, and just he's buying auctions of collections and stuff, and
Good
it's
for
just
him,
like,
man. That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and everyone down at the store, he's the expert. They'll ask him, and even Adam is like, I'm not sure what storyline is this. Colin's like, oh, that's so and so, and he's like, it was written by this person, drawn by this person, and just like, woo.
See, good for him.
Speaking of
Whenever I've done
Encyclopedia
that,
Brown,
like at a Comic-Con, it's very cool. There used to be, who was it that was such an expert? E. Nelson Bridwell was the guy in DC's like 60s and 70s where everybody that worked for the company went to him and said, I'm about to have this appear, in a story. Does this fall in line with what's happened before? Oh yes, Mr. Yes, Pitalik is from the fifth dimension. Remember, not the sixth. And you know what I mean? He has these. He had one rivalry with Batmite and whatever else it might be. And then I think Mark Waid is another one of those guys that seems to just have an encyclopedic knowledge. He can name issue and creator and you know what I mean, all the everything of it. And so good for your son that he's becoming that, because I have a little bit of that. I tend to retain, oh yeah, that was FF81 was where the Thing had to battle the gangsters, and I don't even know if that's true, but sometimes I can pull those out. That the Galactus trilogy is 48 to 50 because it's famous. You know what I mean?
Right. And he's been reading, but he's started reading some of the stuff digitally through Hoopla, through Comixology. And I've told him before, he's like, why do you read so much digital? I'm like, because it's easy. I can sit in bed, and I just take the issues and put them away. And so he's like, no, it's, you got to have the physical and the smell and the feel.
It's the smell of it. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. And I'm like, I don't disagree with that. Maybe I'm just getting old. So he made a list of hundreds. Here's all the Batmans in order that I want to read. Here's all the Green Lanterns in order I want to read. And he literally spent days to compile his list. So when he started, I'm like, okay, you have a little bit of Mensa OCD going on there. But
no, it's important because if there really are a lot of cross references and back history, you don't want to be like, well, they're talking about like he's already fought this guy, but I've not read that issue.
Right.
Darn it. I don't want to be out of order.
Just a caveat there. It's important to uber geeks. To most of the rest of the world, it is not important.
They're not getting the full experience. They're not a real Batman fan. They're not. Oh my God.
Yeah, I agree.
If you read Terry Pratchett's Discworld books and you find out that, of course, he wrote them as it occurred to him. Pretty much he had various different characters and they'd appear in and out, but then there's been all manner of different lists that now say, if you really want to read the history of Discworld, either chronologically or where you won't get any back references that you haven't already read, here's the orders in which to do that. And there's more than one, if you will.
Yes, yeah, people argue about that.
Yes.
So he found that he started reading some digitally just because he had an iPad and he could put them. Same thing I argued with him. I've got 300 on my iPad in order. I just keep
carry this wherever I go.
Yes.
Yep.
And so he came up and says, I hate to say it, but I'm really enjoying reading them digitally. I could lay in bed and I don't feel like an omnibus is go crush my face.
Right, exactly.
So
That is, everything, right? I've actually done a cool talk about this. As everything gets digitized, it's amazing that they get a new life. The long
yeah,
tail exists, that things get to continue to sell that they would never have had physical space or cost associated with it to carry anything but Dark Side of the Moon. You know what I mean? For various different music artists or books or something like that, you can, in a big bookstore like Barnes and Noble, you can go and see, boy, they don't have every Stephen King. They have the ones that sold the best, or
right.
they have the most current ones. But if you're looking, you have to like hit the used bookstores or hit Amazon and hope you find a copy that somebody didn't let their dog chew on before they sold it to you. You know what I mean? And
Right.
of course, the dog didn't chew the words off the page. It's still readable. But if you want to have a nice, neat lineup in your shelf, you can't have something that looks like it was in a war zone next to all the ones that are minty fresh. You know what
Right.
I mean? So,
Right.
oh
So
well, it is kind of cool that there's a whole science. There's a whole, like, people that 25 years old are getting to delve into, like Rhino used to do. Here's the whole back
Right.
catalog of this artist, and let's capture their best stuff, and let's capture the stories in a little booklet that goes with it, and get the live versions of certain things, because this really was the band at the height of its powers, and they were at the Cleveland, auditorium, and then you can hear the first time someone said "Hello, Cleveland,"
right.
which is like, it's so famous, it's become like a rock, stereotype in every movie. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I love that it hasn't just been, as much as I love being the collector and the one that finds those treasures. It's very cool that there are people that are have that same desire to not just let these things fade and even be lost because nobody can find them anymore. I love that there's still, I can go back and listen to the best of old Genesis because they keep on kind of finding, yeah, we didn't realize we had these live tapes that were from the radio simulcast, but somebody captured them in really good, not, a soundboard recording instead of a fan with a tape recorder in the audience. And they sound great. And they really are a slice of history, if you will.
So bringing up the music, we missed this last week. What are you listening to? What have you been listening to this past week?
So, I got a couple comedy albums. John Pinette. There's a couple. Oh, this is so sad. People that Colin and I used to really love, a whole bunch of them died, like, within the last 20 years. So we lost Richard Jenny, and we lost John Pinette, and we lost Robert Schimmel, and very different styles, very different kinds of comedians, but they were the ones that when they came to our local comedy club, there's no way we're going to miss them. You know what I mean? So, having just recently had that pang of discovered a Robert Schimmel book, and a quick sad story. Robert Schimmel, was a very ribald comic. He talked about sex openly, the funny things about sex, if you will. Well, he got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and fought it off, but kept touring to pay for his cancer treatments. And so it was an incredible act of bravery and will to see, he's so gaunt, and yet he would come alive on stage for the hour and a half that he was going to do his show. And then they'd take him off stage and give him his oxygen. And, so it's just the weirdest thing to experience that. He didn't just leave stage after he got over it. He would have conversations with fans afterwards for anybody who was also, and I had my melanoma bout. And so there's there's a weird kinship where you've been through hell together. You've been through tough times and stuff like that. So he survived all this stuff and then died in an auto accident. And what? Come on, universe. Come on. You know what I mean? That's not fair. That's not right. So, having thought about that recently and discovered a book called Cancer on $5 a Day, because he had to make fun of that too, I then went looking and I found a couple of those old things. And it's just weird. A person's voice, a person's material can transport you back in time. And
Yeah.
if you haven't heard that material, it's hilariously funny. So there's just, so I've been listening to some comedy albums, and that combination of laughing and crying because they're gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you can't
we're not going to get
more.
any more from John Pinette. We're not going to get any more from Richard Jenny, who, at the height of his powers, there's nobody that's ever made me gasp, please stop, because I can't catch my breath, because you're so good, and every line builds on the last one. And it was just, boy, was he witty and perfect. So having said that, it's weird to be all this laughter, and at the end you're like, oh man.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not used to having conflicting emotions as much that, but part of getting old is you start losing some friends.
Fortunately.
Yeah, you know what I mean. So,
Yeah,
um,
we
on
had
a
Michael
happier,
Stanley a couple weeks ago,
yeah,
big Cleveland star. And they talked. I heard they were talking about him on the radio. I've listened to Michael Stanley. Obviously, heard his music. He's never been one of my go-to. Oh, I've got all his stuff type artists. I know it, but they were talking about him how he could have moved to Hollywood or LA. He could have went to New York or some big city and recorded and been a bigger star, been in movies more, done more producing. And also he's like, no, Cleveland's my home. I'm going to live here.
yes,
So he was big in the way he wanted to be big, and
exactly.
very much honored and recognized for that. So that's, I've been listening to a little bit of him lately. It just made me think of that.
That makes good sense. And honestly, um, I'll have to tap into you for what you would recommend because I did not know enough about him before coming to Cleveland. Colleen has always liked him, but I have like one of his albums and I think he's got 10. And so, I mean, and I know that he was the guy that like elsewhere wasn't as big. In Cleveland, he would sell out 3 nights at Blossom
Yeah.
and stuff like that, which is a big outdoor venue that it's pretty impressive to sell out Blossom.
Yes.
So I kind of want to, while there is a lot of revival in him and not necessarily in a ghoulish way, sometimes when someone dies, prices go up, they become harder to find.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that because it's still mostly Cleveland, that people are kind of like honoring him and delighting in him instead of, well, I can make a buck off of him,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Honestly, because I knew the hits that had been on the radio, that's about all I really honestly knew. I went to Spotify and they always give the top 5 or 10 songs being listened to by that artist. So I just started there and listened to those. And then I went and looked through the list of albums and, I looked a little around online. What's the most popular Michael Stanley album? And I went to that one. What's the Dark Side of the Moon for Michael Stanley? And
Got it.
just
And that's probably
started
what
there.
I'll do as well. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Delve into the catalog. Exactly.
Nice,
So,
nice guitar work. Good crunching guitar songs. Nothing outlandish or spectacular, but very solid rock and roll.
that's what I've heard about him. Like ever since I knew about him was he didn't get the big break that Bob Seger did, that John Cougar Mellencamp did, that he didn't get that one radio airplay thing that kind of took him to the next level, didn't move out of town perhaps, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So it really is like Greg Kihn, there's all kinds of people that really make music that I love, but they just were always one thing down. And maybe that's what kept them decent and authentic.
Yeah.
They didn't go down the, hey, I'm making enough money to kill myself with cocaine now. Hey, now I'm an insufferable jerk because everybody's telling me how great I am.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
so,
he wrote My Town for Cleveland and it's almost an anthem where,
Yes.
going around Cleveland. So
exactly.
you got that.
I like that one much more than Cleveland Rocks. You know what I mean? Which everybody always does from sorry, not the Hoople, who is it? How could I not remember his name? It'll come to us.
I want to say Rundgren, but it's not Rundgren.
It's not. It's he was part of Mott the Hoople, and then like I said, it'll come to us.
Yeah.
Besides that, I'm still having great success with original album classics. The big combines, Warner and other places continue to say, hey, here's 5 albums from an artist for $20, $4 an album. How can I resist?
Here's
so I just got
Al
America,
special.
for instance. Really, and it really, it presses every button, checks every box on. He's a collector. He likes getting the meat of the order from these guys. And they're like, they seem to have not, they're not cleaned up. Like they're not a Steve Wilson remix of something, but they're also like crisp, digitally good. They're not just, oh God, this sounds like scratchy vinyl. So I just got America, for instance, and I didn't realize how much, as often is the case, they have songs that were on the radio that everybody knows. Everybody knows Tin Man or Horse with No Name. But on these albums, there's so many other great cuts with, like, they have Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young level harmonies. They really sound great. There's really, again, some talented guitar and stuff like that. And so as I've listened to it more than once, it's like, I just didn't appreciate them enough. They're one of those things, I only heard them on the radio. I didn't have any of their albums before this, but I kind of knew I wanted to have them in my catalog and my listening. And now I'm like, wow, I would have been more in support of them back then. I really like these guys.
Yeah, I found a few artists like that recently.
Yeah. Whereas there's been things like where you get the Black Oak, Arkansas greatest hits, and it's like they have like one. They have one greatest hit, and everything else on the thing sounds like them, but it doesn't sound memorably good.
Right.
And so, sorry, Black Oak, Arkansas, to diss you so much, but there's some things that just they're not worth 5 albums. They really have a one album greatest hits things, and there's not more depth. There's just kind of redo.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe, and again, my musical
Oh,
sensibility is not everyone's.
oh, you're right.
And
And that could be different for everybody, but there's definitely artists that, we remember them, but they had one big hit, you know.
exactly. And somebody also, Inagata Devita, Iron Butterfly, I really have liked them. And actually, I've seen them in a club, before, and they were doing that last farewell tour and stuff like that. And another one where if you're looking for psychedelic rock, you know what I mean? They were a particular genre,
Right.
and where they didn't try to necessarily be that super melodic. They noodled around a lot, not quite jazz, but just kind of, but I really liked discovering things that I didn't realize how good they were. There's a lot of talented musicianship there, but they just got one song on the radio. And even then, how often did you hear that? That's the song that DJs would put on so they could go to the bathroom because it was 18 minutes long. You know what I mean? I'm going to go take a bio break, get a cup of coffee, and come back and say, well, that was decent stuff from Iron Butterfly. You know what I mean?
I got that song on Rock Band because most of my kids didn't know it. And I'm like, come on, let's play this one song. They're like, no, let's do a lot. I'm like, why don't we play this one first and see how you
Right.
feel?
Exactly. And then 18 minutes later, their fingers are burnt.
Yeah. I said, no, what we need to do is we need to play this and then the full 2112 suite. And that will probably be good for the night. 2 songs, good to go.
Exactly. So that's what I've been listening to, but I have certain things that I return to because, like, you listen to the first Marillion album because, hey, there's 3 cuts on each side. I love things where it's not 3-minute little pop confections. I love it where they're 7 and 10 and 20-minute songs. And Spock's Beard, Beware of Darkness, and in the they're just, every cut on that album makes me happy that this group of musicians got together and they were so talented and they immortalized. You know what I mean? Like, there's this, it's really a perfect album where there's no filler, there's no bad cuts from start to finish. It's like, man, this all sounds great. And I love the lyrics. And this is a little bit of like a Gentle Giant homage. And I just, Styx Equinox is a perfect album where every single cut is archetypal perfect Styx. And it's before they broke it big with Grand Illusion. But you know what I mean? There's just so much good stuff.
There's a lot of albums that I heard as an album without having known any hits or radio play. And I think of them as a complete album that every song means something to me. There's not 1 or 2 that are special and the rest are filler, and that's what I think a lot of the kids are missing with only listening to the biggest hits on Spotify,
Exactly. And it's kind of funny. A friend of mine just posted about the neuroscience of music and that, humanity has loved music for a long time, but why? And now they're finally getting to where with brain scanning and magnetic resonance imaging and stuff like that, they're finding out that music, it really does activate the pleasure centers of your brain in a very specific way. And that as you can prove that it's causal because as they activate it, with or without music and like try to overflow it or underflow it, if you will, it really is that music is the thing that's causing the pleasure. So I think that one of the reasons that I don't make my own playlists, I listen to albums all the way through, is because I like that you get on a train and you take the train to the end of the line from start to finish. And when I do randomize my cuts, there's all manner of things where like, oh, I wanted to hear the next cut after that one on the album. It segues nicely. And instead now my mood changed too quickly. My expectation was different.
Yeah.
However, having said that, one of the reasons I also still listen to the radio when I'm in the car instead of having my iPod and all my millions of songs is because I like that little spurt of incremental pleasure that comes from you don't know what's coming next, and then a good song comes on. It's like, man, it's been forever since I heard Dexy's Midnight Runners doing "Come On Eileen," and you crank it a little bit, and it's just a surprise, and I get a lot of my whatever serotonin and all the other good things come a little bit from surprise. So the combination of going to a concert, live music, where you don't know what they're going to do, and they do that opening chord, boom, boom, and it's like, oh yes, close to the edge or whatever. There's a very cool thing about I've been programmed to anticipate, but then when you get a real cool surprise, and one of the things I hate was when they take a whole bunch of their good songs and they do a medley. It's like, no, finish in the cage. Don't go into another song. I want to hear it because the climax, the crescendo of the song is so great, and now you took it from me.
Right.
Oh,
Well, you know what I found is some of my most favorite albums that I think of as albums and listen to as albums, and
right, all the way through. It's a
and
piece of work.
the end of one song, I might anticipate the beginning of the next because it's part of the whole story. Most of those I got through Columbia Record Club. Right?
Boy, that's interesting. Okay, we have like 30 albums for $1 or for a
Yeah.
penny or whatever it was, and
Right.
then okay,
Because they would send you an album or two a month, and you would
Mhm.
get those sometimes before they were doing the hits on the radio or before you heard them a lot. So I got to hear
Interesting.
the album as an album without, I heard these 3 hits and that's what I focus on. So
Yeah, I do find like there's certain. I like Alan Parsons' Project a lot, and there's certain like I, Robot is one of those albums that I almost always I do. I listen to it all the way through. It's got a lot of radio friendly cuts, a lot of things made on the radio, but I like that. But then what I find is Alan Parsons also had the thing where he had a lot of the same musicians, but he had different vocalists, and he was really canny with the style of vocalist was good for the song. So you'll hear this really is more of a ballad, more of a rocker, more of a plaintive thing, I don't mind the dynamics of it's not the same vocalist throughout. It's actually, I think of it as kind of a little collection of things.
right.
And he was really good at how to put him in the right order, how to put him with the right vocalist and stuff like that. He's such a great producer, as you know. So, yeah. Engineer. And
Yeah, kind of
so
like Schmaltz from Boston. Kind of the same thing.
Exactly. That boy, he was a technical wizard as well as, didn't he reinvent like the Rockman amplifier,
Yeah.
right? So he could have his guitar sound like what he wanted it to
Yeah.
sound like.
Yeah,
Nothing on the market did. It says, well, I'll rig one up.
Yeah, it wasn't the first couple albums. He did everything himself, like in his basement recording studio.
Exactly, except for Brad Delp, and I think him and the drummer, the vocalist and the drummer were the ones that contributed. Otherwise, Schultz was kind of a Rundgren guy where he could play everything, and so he did.
Right.
So
what have you been reading?
That's So I just read a book called Funny Lines by a guy named Alan Zweibel, and what it's about is he's a writer that has been around since the early days of Saturday Night Live and to date, and the subtitle of the book is How I Helped Funny People Be Funnier.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's a cool, like a background look at, he wrote for like, here's the original Saturday Night Live cast of Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi and Lorraine Newman and Gilda Radner. And a big run of the book is that he was good friends with Gilda Radner. They were very early on wrote and kind of like had a relationship, but kind of platonic, but they kept helping each other in the industry. And so just the way that he talks about what it was like to be in the background, hearing his words come out from someone who became famous becoming them. That's very satisfying. He then worked with Gary Shandling on the Gary Shandling Show, and he's written with like Dave Barry and Carl Hyacin, and so it's not a small claim to fame. He really has been involved with some very cool people and in some big projects, but he's also humbly wrote North, which is one of the biggest tank movies of all time. Rob Reiner, I think, had just done The Princess Bride, and then maybe immediately did North, or at least one movie soon after that, and it just was this is the movie that Roger Ebert's movie review was. I hated everything about this movie. And so that's kind of what a career is that you get these wonderful transcendent moments, years, 5 years, and then the industry can turn its face from you because, wow, you wrote something that lost so much money. Now you have the stink, the taint on you, and it takes someone that believes in you to bring you back in. And so very, very good roller coaster ride, if you will, of this guy's cool career, and he's a good writer. So it's a good sense of, that would have been cool to be backstage with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Kind of behind the scenes, but big.
Behind the scenes, exactly. And I love reading, there's books like that about other books about Saturday Night Live, about National Lampoon, about kind of being there at the origin of things. You know what I mean? That these things didn't just happen. People really worked hard to make Monty Python work and Second City work and things like that.
Not all
and so it's cool to see those stories captured. Yeah, exactly.
Take some work.
I also have been reading the Licanius trilogy, which Colleen actually got me this for Christmas, and I'm only on the second book of the three because each of the books is 750 pages. They are indeed like wrist, I'm strengthening my wrists while reading these books. And it's your classic epic fantasy series. Good heroes, good villains, a system of magic. They're traveling around the world. There's mysteries, there's reveals. The cool thing about this seems to be that characters have lived for a long time and they've taken on different names over the course of time. And in some cases, they made themselves lose memories because they had gone down a really bad path and they didn't want to be that person anymore. So then they find out that they're actually like the heritage that they have is not always been good. And how do they come to grips with, I almost destroyed the world. I really hurt friends, etc. And so there's a whole bunch of not only the big sweep of things, but really personal, um, considerations about like, can you change as a person? You know what I mean? Are you really always a hero or a villain? Can you be pushed so far that you do bad things? Can you out of neglect? Anyway, they're really good, but boy, they're a big read. So that's my book that I've been reading, like maybe 50 to 100 pages each night as I go to bed.
Right.
And depending on how good the section I'm reading is, I read a lot or a little as I go before I go to sleep. So how
Right.
about yourself? What's
I've been reading several things. I tend to not focus on one book at a time anymore. It seems it depends on how I feel for
interesting?
the day, which
Okay.
is weird for me, but whatever. The big book I've been reading is called Dead South. It's actually by a friend of mine, Zach Bohannon. It's the second in a post-apocalyptic zombie trilogy.
Okay.
So I actually got a copy of it early to review, and I've kind of let him down because the book's been out for almost a month and I haven't finished it to give my review yet. So I owe
Okay.
him. But
Okay.
I mean, it's if you like The Walking Dead
I
and
was going to
you
say
want,
Dead South sounds Walking Dead-ish.
yes, it's
Okay.
very much zombies everywhere. But the character is very interesting. John South is his name. But I mean, if you like post apocalyptic zombie stuff, it's a great book. Nice, easy read. And I don't want to take away from anything negative saying about it, but
Yeah.
it's not. Where you have to like super stop and, oh, let me consider that. It's a zombie B-rated movie type thing.
Got
It's
it. You're going
fun
to
and a
shoot a lot
good
of
read.
people in the head. You're going to be on
Yes.
the run. You're
Yeah.
going to, okay.
But he puts a lot of depth to the main character and
Yeah.
he's expanding this character. So it's got a little more than most of the zombie stuff I've read in the past.
Very
So
cool.
been a good read, but I owe him a good review. So I figured I'd mention it on the podcast and maybe a couple people will go get it to make up for that fact.
There we go. I really, things tend to go in waves. And so oftentimes when there's a whole bunch of zombie books coming out, I'm looking for, okay, people who love zombie books, which are the three best ones out of these 10 so that I don't want to drink from the fire hose. I want to read the best of multiple
Right.
genres and that kind of thing. So,
Right.
okay. So Dead South.
Yeah.
Okay. Very
And
good.
speaking of zombies and walkers, I don't know how much you ever followed Kirkman's Walking Dead comic.
I've like the first 30 issues. It was starting to come out just when I was stopping collecting comics, if
Oh,
I remember
okay.
right. And one of the things when I started watching the series was, well, that diverged pretty quickly. You know what I mean? That it wasn't at all just replaying the comic books, that
Right,
they
right,
changed a lot of things early.
right.
Okay.
Well, I must say, issue 100 of that comic, when I got to that one, I had to stop reading for a while. It seriously, I was so distraught and messed up, I couldn't read it for a
Oh,
while.
man. Oh,
And
man. Well done
recent,
on his part to
yeah,
evoke such a reaction.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And recently he ended the series. I don't know if you heard that.
I did
Um,
not know that.
it
Okay.
was not expected. After everything they'd been through, it was a sudden and surprise ending. And
That
it,
he decided he was done.
yeah, I'm not
Okay.
sure he talked about the reasons. I haven't read any of the interviews or anything,
Okay.
but it wasn't like we're leading up to this big climax and something's going to happen. It's the end of the series is coming. Nobody knew. It just, you read it and you're like, oh my God, it's over. And he said, but
Huh.
he said the one death, because that was The Walking Dead. You never know who is going to live and die. You could expect
Right.
anybody to die. He said the one death that nobody expected was the death of the comic book itself. I was like, well, that's pretty good, man. I like
That's
that.
pretty good. Exactly.
But they've
Wow.
been re-releasing the whole series colorized now, which I don't care for. I liked it in black and white. So,
Black and
but
white.
they do have that. So,
Okay. I did see, because he also wrote it, that his Invincible series just got made into an animated series. And so I was
yes.
curious about that, because I thought that was a very good take on what would it really be like to be like a visitor from another planet, and that you weren't necessarily benevolent. You were kind of like, yeah, I'm the advanced guard and you are all my pets until,
Yeah.
the conquerors get
Right.
here. You know what I mean?
Colin binge watch almost all of it on Sunday, and he loved it. He loves the comic, so he
Oh
loved
man,
the
as you know, I
series.
don't want to binge, but it's good to hear that he liked it.
Yes.
There wasn't like after the first episode, he was like, "Oh, this didn't,
No.
fulfill the promise."
One of the cool things that he said Kirkman did was after he got into the series and got further along, he's like, I made a couple mistakes in the first couple issues, things I didn't think about. So he corrected it and did them the way he wanted to in the show.
Animated series.
Yeah.
That is kind of cool when people get a chance to revisit. And like you said, okay, I will
Yeah.
look for
So
that.
check that.
Again, I have many of them, and so I'll look forward to seeing what he did to fix things.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And one last thing, I don't know if you've caught this. It's based on a comic book. It's a TV show on Sci-Fi called Resident Alien.
So I've heard of it,
Okay.
and also it's a big video game franchise, right? I'm pretty sure that
maybe
it's
maybe
okay.
That I'm not sure
Right.
about. But
Okay.
do you know who the star is of it?
No.
Alan Tudyk.
Oh my!
Yes,
From Firefly.
Right. So
and
now
stuff
you got to
like
go check it out, right?
Absolutely. I was happy to see him in the Doom Patrol series as
Yes.
Mr. Nobody, because he's one of those guys, he's got a very distinctive look and he's got real acting chops. And I'm like, please don't let him just languish. People use this guy. He's
so
he's
good.
ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Very
loved
good.
him
So
in
Resident
Tucker and
Alien.
Dale. That was great.
Yes,
But
exactly.
Gina was watching Resident Alien. I didn't know what it was or whatever. I walk in and I see Tudyk. I'm like, oh, cool. And I watch a minute of it. I'm like, is he playing an autistic character? She's like, no, he's an alien trying to be human. And I was
Right.
laughing because I'm like, oh my God, he comes across as autistic, which is a great take on aliens because I'm like, oh, there's so many things that could represent.
That they study others' behavior and mimic it instead of having that they really naturally say, I would like a hug now.
Yeah.
Right. I mean?
So he takes over for this doctor, and
Okay.
the police chief shows up and says, he's just in a cabin on vacation. And the police chief shows up and says, I need you to come look at a dead body. He's like, well, go get your ME. He's like, it is the ME. He's like, oh. So he goes and he walks over, he looks down, he says, okay, I have looked at the dead body. Can I leave? So I was pretty hooked.
That's very good. I will look for that. Resident Alien. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's kind of fun. Let me harken back to this. One of the, sometimes you have an itch that you haven't been able to scratch for a long time. When I stopped collecting comics, there's a series called Next Wave that was coming out from Warren Ellis, one of my favorite writers. And what it is it's a collection of kind of like second tier heroes. It's Machine Man. It's Elsa Bloodstone. It's Captain Marvel, the Monaco Rambeau version. They are, a team that's been put together by an organization called HATE. And I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's, supposedly one of those that's trying to police the world and make it better. But then you find out that they've actually been bought by the Beyond Corporation and they have devilish motives. And so they break away and then they're trying, but the cool point of the series is that the characters are all jaded, world weary. They're not gung ho. Hey, let's go beat up the bad guy. They keep commenting in the comic book about the absurdity of the situations they find themselves in. It's like, really? We have to fight Fin Fang Foom? I thought that he was just, I thought he was only a legend, made up to scare children. And they meet all manner of villains that are also, they got an inherent absurdity to them, like MODOK, the big, super intelligent head creature, and the wry sense of humor, so it's a kind of a parody of comic books of all those usual justifications for, we're fighting this out of nobility. And it's like, there's a certain amount of mercenary, there's a certain amount of, just get this over with, just kill him. I just want to go home. I want to have a beer. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they're perfect angsty, a good take on comic books. The artwork is great. So I think they only lasted 12 issues, maybe, 1 to 6, 1 to 6 and 7 to 12 are the 2 album editions that I got on Hoopla. They're worth seeking out because they really will. They're fun. They're just so much dark humor fun.
That sounds like something I'd enjoy. So I'm going to have to look that up. So have you seen the trailer for Suicide Squad 2?
I just saw it, as a matter of fact, and of course, Harley, and they have the whole, one of the joys of Suicide Squad is, there's a certain amount of turnover because people get killed.
Right.
So they have a chance to introduce some same characters. I think Rick Flag is still there, but a bunch of other characters, and it looks pretty good.
It
You know
does.
what I mean?
I think it looks better than the first one, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I hope that if they're really trying to build a franchise out of it, they have The Wall, Amanda Waller, and so that's got all the right elements, right? It's got a team of superheroes. It's got government conspiracy. It's got good villains. I think that the first one, the villain was the weakest part of it. And if they really have it be that they have why would you get a whole bunch of lethal people together to fight something? It's got to be a really almost like a world-class or really psychotic type villain. And I think that's what's going to happen for any hero. You have to have a good rogues gallery in order to be an accomplished hero.
Yeah.
So Batman, The Flash, and others are really good because of the bench strength of their rogues gallery.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And,
so
the problems with the Suicide Squad, and I think we've talked a little bit, was nobody knew any of those characters. The movie seemed a little rushed and disjointed at times. It's like they weren't sure what they wanted to do with it all. And I didn't even realize what exactly is this bad guy what's the bad guy want and why do they have to kill him? And it wasn't super clear. It was just kind of there.
Right. So if I remember right, wasn't he like some kind of Mayan or Aztec god?
Enchantress.
But this is her brother,
yeah,
right? Or some family relation. You know what I mean?
Well, they were after her, but the big fight was her brother, like huge statue.
Exactly.
And it was like whatever.
So the fact that you and I read a lot and pay attention and still can't figure out what the heck this movie was about is a testament to how shoddy it was. With here's the motivation, here's the characters, whatever they just did with Zack Snyder's Justice League to give backstory to the various different characters and have you understand or care a little bit about them more instead of just throw 6 people at the screen. We're going to put a bomb in your brain, so you got to do what we say. Well, thanks for the backstory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This one, it looks like they realized what was good about Suicide Squad, and they're doing more of that. Okay. Give me the comedy. For a movie like Suicide Squad, it's got to be humorous action. You can't take it serious. I mean, come on.
Yeah. I think we have seen that certain series, when they gave it the first shot, they had to do the origin story, which is kind of like the way it has to be. But then Iron Man 2 or Deadpool 2 or whatever, they got to take the next step. And I often enjoy that. Okay, now that you've got the necessary out of the way, what's the elective? What's the best story you can tell out of all the years of comic books they've got? And they've done a pretty good job of that. Not everyone. There's been some number 2s that weren't that great, that were number 2. Ha, ha, ha. But you know what I mean? I like when they, I don't know, Thor has built well, Iron Man has built well, whereas the Hulk kept seeming to be like the same movie over and over again.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh boy, gamma rays. So we'll see. I'm so much looking forward to being in a theater again. I'm getting my second shot of the COVID vaccine this Friday. Colleen a week after me. 2 weeks after that, we're both going to be able to go out into the world knowing that we're 90% safe.
Right.
And, everybody has these fantasies. It's kind of like the winning the lottery fantasy. What's the first meal you're going to have if you can go out into the world now? And one of the things I want to go to a comedy club, as long as it's one where there's still some separation and some circulating air. I don't know that I want to go to a concert because I don't think you can have a concert without it being pushed together, thrown in crowd. And that's not good. Yeah. Whereas a nice, we won't be able to go to our favorite buffet, but we can go to the steak dinner that Colleen should have had 3 years ago when she got her big bonus and that kind of stuff. Right, you know what I mean? There's all kinds of things. And indeed, to see Suicide Squad in the theater, I've always loved a big movie in a big theater with the surround sound and the huge screen where it's overwhelming. That's the experience to me. As much as I love them on my TV at home, it ain't the same as being just overwhelmed by it.
We went and saw Chaos Walking over the weekend in the theater. And that's something maybe we could talk about next week, tell you a little bit about it. We didn't hit anything on Easter, so maybe we can talk about Easter after Easter.
After Easter, exactly.
So, all right, man.
It's always a pleasure. Take care, Steve.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.